Welcome to Education Scholars Conversations. I'm your host, Jeff Yan. In this episode, you will hear part two of my conversation with Rebecca Thomas, Director of the Pathways ePortfolio program and Adjunct Assistant Professor of the Electrical and Computer Engineering Department at Bucknell University. More links and information about today's conversation can be found on Digication's Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Full episodes of Digication Scholar Conversations can be found on YouTube or your favorite podcast app. Now, you are, the director of the Pathways ePortfolio program, which is, like you said, a campus-wide initiative. Can you give us some sort of insights, maybe, anecdote on some of the things that might have either surprised you or impressed you on what students have been able to do to include those aspects of life into their education. And it doesn't have to be about engineering, because I know that the majority of our students are engineers in this case. um, something that will give other folks a little bit of a practical glimpse of, oh, that's what you mean. Because to me, I think that there's a lot of assumption that simply just goes, okay, great, engineer, doing meaningful work, maybe they're doing a better, I don't know, solar panel, and that's it. To me, it feels a lot more nuanced than that.
Yeah. Um, yeah, so we're still fairly early in, getting students to do ePortfolios. And so I don't know if I have a lot of specific examples, but the ones that we've been doing so far are usually pretty course focused, right? That'll be part of, an instructor decides to put them in the course, right? They're part of the grade, part of a project, part of something. So sadly, right, that kind of confines what you're expecting and what we get. But we're starting to see, right, the students pull in other parts, right, and see more of who our students are. That's faculty who've used portfolios have really enjoyed them because they're getting to
Mm.
see more glimpses of who their students are and what they're interested in, what they really want to do, which are things like we usually don't know because we don't
Ah,
ask, and maybe we
okay.
didn't even know to ask.
Right.
Um, yeah,
That's so interesting. I know that you were saying that, hey, we're just starting and doing this is actually incredibly insightful. In my mind, because um, there is, it almost feels once you said it that it should be obvious. When you work with students, it's great when you know who they are, who they want to be, and what do they value in their lives, what makes them happy, and what makes them feel excited. But if you don't know that, and all that you know is, here's my questions and I want you to come with the answers, it really ignores the entire layer. So it's almost like what you're saying, before we get to the point where you can see the results of what these students are doing, we need them to have a go at showing their professors who they are in a authentic way, so that the professors can then say, oh, knowing that, let's push you in this direction,
yeah,
right? But without that, it doesn't work, right? Because even if I were just to say, let's say that I'm a professor in uh, chemical engineering, and I'm really my expertise is in photovoltaic cells and creating next generation of solar power, blah blah blah, right? I can tell people that, hey, this is it, you need to be working on this, because our world is getting too hot, we need to find new ways to create energy. Almost like if you just tell them that, it doesn't count. Do you know what I mean? It's like you need to get you need to learn what the students who the students are first.
Mhm. So that has been kind of my
Yeah.
first ePortfolio, big ePortfolio project in class has been, I teach the first year design
Mhm,
course in electrical and computer engineering.
mhm,
And this is the first course that students take within the department. They take it the spring
mhm,
semester, their freshman year. Um, and so I designed an ePortfolio, right, that gives them a little bit of a chance to explore the discipline because a lot of them come in not really knowing what an electrical engineer or a computer engineer does. Um, right. A lot of people don't know that because I still get asked I say I'm an electrical engineer if I can wire a house, and I most certainly cannot do that. Right. And electrical engineers are doing all kinds of things that have nothing to do with wiring
But you're
houses.
also not an electrician.
Right. Right.
Right? Yeah.
um,
Mhm,
right. But so it gives them a chance though to explore,
mhm,
what are the different things? And electrical engineering is hugely broad, right?
mhm,
There are the people that work on power, like traditional power stations, even, different things with signals and RFID. I did very small things, right? Semiconductors and making devices out of semiconductors, right? So students get a chance to at least dip their toe in this. But also in their ePortfolio, they have to answer questions like, "What do you value?" Right? And we give a list. What are the top 5 things in this that you value and why? What interests you? Like what hobbies did you do, and what have those taught you about yourself, right? So they're learning at the same time, what are the possibilities in this discipline that I've chosen?
mhm,
Who am I, and how do these things link together, right? And no, it's only one one ePortfolio assignment very early on, but I think that kind of sets them on the right track to think more in that way. And just to be reflective in general, right? A huge part of
mhm,
ePortfolios are learning how to reflect and learning, how to apply that in different places. And that's one thing that we've seen even early on is that when we ask students to reflect in their first year, then they get to their second year and they're taking design courses or they're even taking, kind of a more technically focused required course. But we see them being more reflective and transferring that, to different courses and to like different domains even.
mhm,
Um, yeah, so that's been really, really cool to see and kind of surprising that yeah, it it didn't take that much. It took like one intervention, one
I think
ePortfolio
that
intervention to do that.
yeah, I think I really feel like that these are the I almost wanted to take your 8 semester long, follow up, course, like this idea and like go all the way down to like middle school or something, because like imagine um how differently people will approach life um, if they were exposed to things a little earlier. Because I think it's kind of like I always have this vision, Rebecca. When you were saying, "Well, it's just this one thing in the beginning I have them do," but to me, it's like if you were in the ocean, you're sailing this large ship, and you like turn them, 1 degree, one direction. But if you then run 4 years of sailing this boat, you're going to be in a different continent,
Yeah.
you know? um, and so it's like, it's such a big, huge, impact when you can catch them at the right time, don't you think?
Yeah.
Um, can you tell me a little bit about? I want to talk a little bit about today's engineering students. Um, I I think that in the last definitely in the last decade, but I think even especially perhaps because of COVID, because of all of the different societal norms being changed and challenged, in the last few years, um, there there seems to be a whole new set of students having maybe different value systems, comes to facing different issues, um, and I've talked to a lot of people about that in sort of the general student population, but I kind of kept wondering whether some of those issues exist for, engineering students, or whether you see any sort of trends. So you already had mentioned, gender is something that you're still fighting for, right?
This is
And we already talked about the sort
yeah,
of nuanced, approach of like problem solving versus let's talk about the problem first.
yeah,
But are there other things too? I mean, I see a lot of issues, like mental health. I see a lot of issues with people thinking about affordability of higher education, um, and probably one that is popular these days is artificial intelligence. And I almost don't want to talk about specifically like chat gpt or generative sort of stuff, but more the further implications of where artificial intelligence may come in. Of course, some of your students, I'm assuming, are studying that and maybe practicing in that area.
yeah. Um, so yeah, one change I see just about kind of their interest, I see a lot more students interested in um, environmental issues, right? And interested in doing things with renewable energy, and doing different things that can help protect our planet. So there's, I think that's one thing that is different about this generation of students. Um,
Can I ask a really simple question here? Do you meet any students who don't believe that we have an environmental issue today?
I have not come across any.
Mhm. I
Mainly
mean,
when
I
I
know
hear
it
about it, though,
sounds like
I
a
ask
stupid
them.
question, but there are pockets of our population believes that, right?
Yeah, yeah, right. But most of the time, when I hear about their interest in it, right, is because I ask, like, why did you choose this,
Mm,
or
yeah. Mhm.
what are your interests that overlap,
Mhm.
right? And I hear that a lot more.
Mhm.
So I don't ask the question flat out,
Yeah, mhm.
um, but
You
nobody
kinda
has
you're
ever.
past that. Everyone's, they're more thoughtful than just, do I believe it, do I not? Of course I do.
Yeah,
Okay,
and I
good.
wanna. Right, and a lot of them are a little bit more aware, I think, of, the issues that our technology, right, that engineers have created, uh, are causing. Right? So engineers have been part of the problem, I believe a big part of the problem, and now we need
Mhm.
to really figure out how to be part of the solution.
Yeah. Is there a sense of, like, I know that um, when I talk to people, if you, I mean, I think Greta Thunberg is the real, the person that really comes to mind, that this is a person who is saying, you guys really screwed up this planet for us. Like literally just this last, few decades. It wasn't that screwed up before. Like you really did it. You screwed it up for us. We are gonna have to fix it. Hopefully you can help fix it, but we are gonna really be the one who's gonna face this and have to fix it. There's a sense of both urgency, but there's also a sense of, like they are born with this weight on their shoulders. You know,
And
for the generation that created it, they didn't have that sense. They just wanted to do whatever they want. They may not know that that's what they were doing, or they may not realize how badly it can be, and how large the problem is going to scale to. Like the butterfly effect, the
mm,
effect.
but yeah, I mean, that was kind of the problem engineers were handed, and,
Mhm.
when engineering education was developed, it's right, how do we marry industry with manufacturing, like, how
Yeah,
do we make more things? How do we make cheaper things? And
more
engineers have
efficiently
been
and yeah.
wildly successful at doing this, right? But
Yep.
now we are at the point where we have to ask, should we, right?
Mhm.
Should we keep doing this?
Yeah.
You know, and how do we address kinda the the issues that have been created already?
So, do you see students today having been equipped now with the technical skills that they have, and these ideas of what are the big wicked problems in the world? Do you still see that maybe some of them are certainly still interested in going to get that job at Google versus people who are doing more entrepreneurial stuff, or are they just looking for opportunities? Doesn't have to be entrepreneurship, but it might be about joining organizations and companies that have a different kind of mission and purpose. So where do you see that?
So, although I do think where students will go, right, is kind of up to the students and, um, right, that's part of my goal in engineering education as well is to give the students agency, right? And I don't expect that all students are gonna wanna work on these, really complex, societally relevant problems, right? There's some that might wanna work at Google their whole lives, and if, that's their choice, that's what they wanna do. But yeah, I think I do hope though that being exposed to this, more students will be prepared to take on these problems because I think that's a big part of the issue is in the past and, even kind of right now, a lot of students, right, who are just prepared with a very technical focus, don't have the kind of preparation they need to like make solving these kind of problems even a possibility, right? That's not an accessible option to them. So, right, I think we're opening up that door, and I think though based on what the current generation of students is concerned with, that yeah, we should see more of them kind of going down that path.
Mhm. But I do also think, don't you think it would be fair? I mean, I feel like that we've beaten up on Google a lot here, but don't you think it'd be fair to say that um, we also need students who will be working and running the future of Google's and Facebook's, etc. But they would be the one who need to inject that sense of urgency to privacy, respecting people's, sort of data and things of that nature too, right? We need them at all levels, really, don't you
Right.
think?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that there's nothing wrong really working at Google or whatnot, except that like they could be on the team working on the right thing, right?
Yeah.
um, it feels like that happens. I mean, I still remember when um, the person who um, pointed out what happened at Facebook with a study that they had on the impact of social media on especially teenage girls, and to that person worked at Facebook. That person wanted, it was a woman, right? I forgot her name actually. I really shouldn't have. I should look this up, but um, she worked at Facebook with that being her intention, not the intention to be a whistleblower, to solve this problem. And she was promised that that's what they were doing. It was not until the fact that she realized that they weren't being sincere in solving this problem. In fact, they were going to sort of just cover it up, or knew the report's existence, but then not do anything with it. That's when she went and tried to do the right thing, right? Um, but that person had to have this kind of mindset that you were talking about before, trying to figure out what's right and wrong, what are the ethical and 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 ways to be able to probably just to face themselves and face the world. Don't you think?
Yeah. And I think for sure if we've got enough people with, you know, the with different mindsets and the big corporations, then we have the power to change the direction of large corporations too.
Right, and it
Yeah.
could be that, I mean, to me, it's sad that in the last and it's sad that there are industries like, namely like things like oil and gas that found something that is worth, that is essentially, worth a lot of money. It was very, very valuable, but happens to also destroy our environment. And then, we have technology companies that have also then found this thing that's very valuable, and that is people's data, people's profile, people's preferences, but that it destroys people's privacy, right? And and they have to resolve to tricking them into giving up their data and privacy, and making money off of that, right? um, it almost feels like that the next generation of innovation could very well be, hey, look, this stuff is extremely valuable and it doesn't destroy either people or the environment. uh, right, I mean,
Let's hope.
that probably just wasn't a consideration, to be really frank. I think that I genuinely don't believe that people in the beginning, well, I mean, I'm being naive, but I don't believe that they initially set out to destroy and benefit themselves at the same time. I don't think that they could even plan it. I think they just, come across it and just rode the wave, right? Until it became too late.
Well, maybe they didn't even know the effects, but right, they didn't
Mhm.
stop to consider the should we do
Yeah.
things, right?
Yeah.
It's just like,
Well, we are on
we're
the cusp of that a little bit now with AI, don't you think?
yeah, yeah,
Right?
for sure. I mean, AI has come a long way, like, really quickly, and it's a lot to figure out. It's kind of terrifying, but there's a lot of opportunity there too, and figuring out the boundaries of it and, what should and shouldn't be done is, a big complicated issue that has to be looked at from a lot of different angles,
Yeah.
right? Not just the technology one, which says, "We know how to do this."
Right.
Right. Yeah.
I'll tell you, my hope is it's having spoken to a lot of, AI um, engineers who actually, many of them say that, you know what, we made a lot of this stuff work, but we actually don't know how the machine is making it work because it's too complicated for them to even understand at this point. But what seems to be my hope, the saving grace here, is that um, there is still time, there is still a chance for not just the engineers, but for all humans who interact with the machines. Because the machines are not learning just from the engineer. In fact, they can't learn just from the engineer because they need a vast amount of data to learn from. So
Mhm.
they're really learning from society. But it's really from society that gives them ideas of what ethics look like, what values, what are the human values that make the species special, you know, um, and what happiness look like, and so on.
But yeah. Yeah, but a big part
Right?
of the risk is, does the data represent everybody, or
Yeah,
does it
right now
represent
probably. Well, that's one of the problem too, is that we have a disproportionate amount of data that was generated in recent years, um, to available data in the world, right? Like we don't have nearly as much data. I mean, I think that someone said that, YouTube alone generates by megabytes more data in any one day than probably the last century combined, right? And that's probably, I don't know whether that's a exaggeration, but that wouldn't surprise me at all, right?
Yeah,
First of all, it's video versus, but regardless, the point really is that there is a lot more data being generated like disproportionately every minute, now than before. So, like, um, there's got to be some kind of bias built into that, for AI to learn from. But exactly to what I'm hoping for is, it's engineers and students, because it's not all engineering students at Bucknell, right? But all students from places like Bucknell, whether you take on an engineering position or something else, are the ones who will either in the side of the creation of these new technologies and machines and intelligence, um, or they are in the side of just being a responsible part of the community and society, a member of that, to behave and um, contribute to and to teach, ethically and with the understanding of these kind of, these current issues, that allows for technology, whether it be AI powered or not, to have a bias more towards the side that won't destroy us in the
That
future.
yeah. Mm.
Um, well, do you have anything that you want to say to wrap up? I think, thank you so much for spending so much time with me so far.
I don't know. We've went a long ways, but yeah, I'm really excited about like ePortfolios and how integrating those with STEM can help our students narrate, their
Yeah.
paths and think about what they want to do and maybe, shift the trajectory of where we're
Yeah.
going and
Sure.
make it so that yes, they don't destroy us all.
I know that you're going to be too polite to plug, but I'm going to make a plug for you,
Okay.
and for Bucknell. I think for all the institutions, all the people who are in power in their respective institutions, who previously had this idea that STEM students aren't built to do portfolios because they are, you can't reach to that, you can't reach them. They are doing this, sort of, your own idea of what a STEM education may look like. I think you, after this conversation, hopefully you can think again. I think you should go and look at what Bucknell has done. Reach out to Rebecca and maybe her colleagues. That will be featuring many of them, to try to understand, keep an open mind to understand that, you know, um, there's a lot to be learned from the STEM fields, and they also are taking a lot of what you take for granted of your students, in the liberal arts or in the humanities, etc. And there's actually a lot more similarities than there are differences. And in fact, don't discount them. And if you are in an institution where your engineering program is not currently practicing these things, really think twice about it. I think that that could have tremendous impact to society and the world. How's
And
that?
I agree. That sounds great.
All right, Rebecca. It is lovely to chat with you. Thanks for spending the time with me
Yeah,
again.
thanks for
And
having me.
yeah, and let's talk again soon. Okay.
Sounds great.
All right. Bye. Take care.
Bye.
Coming up next, we'll be chatting with Janet Van Loan, Assistant Professor in the Education Department and Co-Director of the Center for Social Science Research at Bucknell University. Here's a quick preview.
Creating a space for students that is inclusive, where everybody feels a sense of belonging, where everyone feels like they will be challenged and they're going to be held accountable and to high expectations, but at the same time, like it is okay to make a mistake.